I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so excited today to be talking about the fantastic series Ghosts with so many of the wonderful cast members from the series. We are joined today by cast members Rose McIver, Danielle Pinnock, Asher Grodman, Brandon Scott Jones, Richie Moriarty, Román Zaragoza, Sheila Carrasco, Rebecca Wisocky, and Devan Chandler Long. And Rose, starting with you, one of the things that I love with Sam is it feels like because she's one of the human characters against the ghosts, and she hasn't been kind of set in her ways for decades or hundreds of years, that there's a lot more ability to allow growth into her as a character and to kind of have her acknowledge her mistakes and try to fix things and admit a lot of her vulnerabilities. And I was interested in kind of how playing a human character against the ghosts gives you a lot more scope for growth and evolution in the character than more of kind of the minute versions of growth that we tend to see in a lot of the ghost characters alongside her.
Great analysis and observation. Yeah, I think Sam is
minute.
No, I mean, I think that there is something. Sam has really, some significant kind of issues with her own family. She's a very impressionable person. I think she's really incredibly eager to please and accommodate. And I think she really struggles because suddenly she's landed with these 8 new family members, essentially, who she coexists with and cohabitates with, that all think really differently, and that you can't please everybody all of the time. You can only, what is that great? You can please some of the people all of the time, or you can please all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. And I think for Sam, it's like that she really does not believe that going into this experience. And so she has to learn like that. She's kind of got to find out who she is based on her relationships and her reactions to the world around her. And it's interesting, you think that by the time I'm 34 and by this age that you sort of have got a sense of who you are-ish, but you don't. I mean, I feel like this in my own life too. I'm just constantly reevaluating and hopefully in a way that that I'm proud of, that it's like you followed this map your whole life and suddenly you kind of encounter these really different experiences that make you sort of wonder if that is what you want to be following and exactly what you still believe. So it's an incredible opportunity to be pitted against all of these different perspectives, and she does have a lot to grow and learn from, but she's also stubborn as hell. So it's a journey, and I think the ghosts have done a phenomenal job at exemplifying growth, given they've been around for hundreds, many of them many hundreds of years, to be able to still change and evolve. And I think there's like a very important message in that.
Yeah. And Danielle, and coming over to you and talking about Alberta, she's got such charisma and presence, and kind of even in the afterlife has this drive to become really renowned. But then we also get the chance to see through a lot of her backstory, the vulnerability that comes with the genesis of that for her in terms of what it means to her family, what it means from the time period that she comes from as well. And so I was interested in how you've kind of approached playing this character with kind of all the showmanship and all the bravado that comes with who she is, but also the intimacy and the vulnerability of where it all stems from.
Well, I have to say the thing that's been most exciting for season 2 is that I feel like we're demystifying what it means to be a strong Black woman. I think when I say Alberta's a hot mess with a heart of gold, I say that with love, because Black women should be able to be vulnerable. We should be able to be messy. We get to see this delicious diva kind of fall apart a little bit in season 2. Season 1 was all about like, yes, I'm going viral, I'm famous and all of that stuff. But now we get to see her kind of explore, oh, do I want a romantic relationship with Pete? I don't know. Can I do this? We see her fall apart at the seams with her really dear friend Hetty, who has been gaslighting her for the last 100 years about who murdered her. We see her we see her wanting to become a parent for the first time when her niece, gets to the mansion. So it's been incredibly, it's been an honor being able to breathe life into Alberta's life. And I have to say that, like, even as we were talking about this earlier, the thing that I think is so fantastic about this show is, yes, we're dealing with death and dying and sometimes grief, and those topics usually are heavier. We're doing it with a comedic spin, but it also has made me, through Alberta, want to live life even more so. I don't want to live a life with regret. You know what I mean? I want to fail. I want to thrive. I want to live my life without apology. You know what I mean? I think season 1, when I was doing the show, I had a lot of imposter syndrome because it was my first time as a series regular. I'm a theater girl through and through, and then got a couple of co-stars, but I never really got to build a character up in TV from the ground up. So I felt, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? And this is in creative company. I was in the best company. You know what I mean? Like, going to work every day feels like going to the comedic Olympics. So I have to say thank you to this cast for giving me that confidence to play Alberta and for always cheering me on. And also to our incredible writers who've written this amazing three-dimensional Black woman, and they steered away from the stereotypes that usually plus-size Black women have to play. And our showrunners who are so open, to hearing our input sometimes in how we see these characters. So to answer your question, season 2 has been fabulous. I've been really able to stretch my wings as an actor, and it's been incredible playing Alberta in both seasons. And I can't wait to see what's on for her for season 3.
I really love that answer. And it feels like the second season has given so much more scope in terms of all of the characters. And Asher, in coming over to you and talking about playing Trevor with no pants on, when we first met him, there's no one who's a bigger fan of Trevor than Trevor himself. But there's been so many spaces where you've been able to kind of open up the scope of this character in terms of what are his priorities, the way that he's always chased attention, girls, money, and through his relationship with Hetty, his relationship with the rest of the ghosts, he's really started to kind of, not all the time, but like have these little moments and inflections of reassessing if that's really what's important or if it's the people around him. And so I was interested in how the second season and writing those aspects into the character has really kind of opened up a lot of that space and allowed you to kind of have these very little kind of like lovely moments of intimacy and vulnerability with a character that didn't necessarily come straight out of the gate with that.
That's a very fun question. Thank you. I think the writers have done such a good job, and I guess one of the fun things about this show is that you have a lot of time to sit and think about who you are in your life, these characters, right? And options are limited because you can't leave the house. You're not living life the way you did. So everything becomes huge. Every little moment becomes huge. And so there's been a lot of fun opportunities working with Rebecca, which was something that I had been lobbying for from day one. I thought the two of them would be a very fun, combustible pairing, and would do, romance and sex in their own very specific way. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of, and I think this is with all the characters, this is a show that kind of moves forward by going backwards, if that makes any sense, where we learn more about these people, and then every little seed we plant just enriches the present moment. So going back and meeting Trevor's family, and then what does that mean for where we've been and where we're going? We just get to play both sides of the kind of the past to present dynamic, and it's just so much fun. And also, again, that thing of taking the very mundane and accessible and making it seem enormous is something that this show does. It's very special.
Yeah.
Can I just hype up Asher real quick? Because I just want to give him his flowers on this call, because the thing is, this character could be an asshole through and through, but the nuance and expertise that he's given this Trevor has been mind-blowing to watch. The moment-to-moment work that this actor is doing, Asher Grodman, is incredible, and the scenes between him and Hetty are fucking sexy. Sorry, I know I'm probably not supposed to be cussing on this thing. I'm ghetto, okay? So this is the thing. I just have to say that
you're in creative company.
He has just killed it. You know what I mean? And really breathed life into Trevor in a way that has just been so special to watch him on set as well as when it airs on screen. So I just wanted to, that's my little thing.
That's very
hype you.
That's very sweet of you. And as you were talking, I just became the color of my shirt. So thank you for doing that.
You did. Oh my God.
Literally changed.
That's so sweet.
As long as we're giving flowers here, I'd like to just reach out and say, Richie Moriarty started a tribute band for White Snake. It's called Pale Serpent. And Richie's been training all year, and he's taking time out of his day because they're doing recordings right now for their first album.
Yeah, sorry, I'm doing drums in here in about 5 minutes. So as soon as we wrap this up, I'll be drumming away.
Richie, Pale Serpent, rocks, dude.
extracurriculars. And Brandon, coming over to you, you talked about with Isaac how when you first took on the role, you kind of saw him as being fairly grounded, and he was much more reserved at the beginning because he had the secret that he'd been carrying for so much of his life and so much of the afterlife. And it's been really beautiful to watch him kind of find his own skin in the afterlife in so many ways. And how has that changed the scope of playing the character and being able to play these to a different emotional scope for him and have these kind of larger reactions and responses because he's not kind of paying attention to see how people are responding to things that he says, and even just the physicality of the character changing for you as well?
Ooh, yeah, it's definitely it's fun. It was wild this season to see him a little bit lighter. Like, I think so much of what season 1 was about was just carrying this like heavy burden with him what he felt was a burden. And so to find spaces where he's sort of like happy, it was almost like, what does this feel like? And it was really fun. I think to see him like physically change too, of just like maybe like being a little bit more like moving through a space with a little bit more of a jaunt that now is retroactively justified to him, I guess. But yeah, it's been like a really lovely journey to sort of see this character who was very grumpy and angry, and for a lot of real reasons, you get some of that lifted off of him. I think has been really fun and really challenging in a good way. But it's been great. It's been a good time.
That's wonderful. And Richie, in playing Pete, even when you first auditioned, it feels like from the very beginning of the process, you were kind of given permission to make bigger choices for him as a character. And one of the showrunners kind of even made a reference to Ned Flanders from The Simpsons being part of what they envisioned in terms of his personality and his characteristics. And so how did that early permission in order to make bolder and bigger choices inform the way that you've kind of played him and developed him? And then what comes with that and making sure that you're still always capturing the more nuanced side of a character when you are leaning into the larger scope of who they are?
Yeah, I think, that's it's very interesting because when I auditioned, I originally read him much more understated and much more like closer to how I saw my dad growing up, who's definitely got a little Flanders in him, but I'd say 10%, not 90. And the casting director at the time in New York asked me to read it bigger. They said, great, let's do another take where you give it more energy, you give it more of that like Flanders energy. And when I got the call that I was going to come out and test in LA, I had to ask my reps, hey, can you ask them which take they preferred? Because I did 2 very different takes on Pete. And they said the second take. So I was like, oh, okay, great. This is more what they're envisioning. But that's always an interesting thing as an actor. Like you come in with your own idea of what you want this to be. And obviously it's influenced by the people who are at the helm of the show. So yeah, getting that sort of information that, hey, this is how we're seeing Pete, it definitely changed how I viewed the character. It certainly, greatly influenced how I played it in the pilot. And like, it's not until you do the character in those first couple scenes that you start to get the feel for who this guy is. Also, when you put on the wardrobe for the first time and you're wearing this arrow in your neck, like all of that informs who the person is. But yeah, I think, Pete is very unlike me in a lot of ways. I am more pessimistic. I am more cynical, I think. And it's really fun.
Miserable to be around.
Really, it's hard.
Yeah. Not a good guy.
Terrible person.
Try ordering food with Richie. It is so difficult.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it's like. It's this. All right. Oh, this is fucking taste like shit.
I was going to say, Richie, that it's like with that generosity though of energy that Pete has and that you bring to Pete, what I think is such an incredible way, like you handle it so deftly that like everything is right here. And it's like his willingness and his enthusiasm and everything's right here, but like his vulnerability is right there too. And when we've seen you snap and we've seen like, that's the flip side that comes with being a character that is, kind of, I would say on the front foot a lot of the time. And, he's puts his energy forward, and that there's just those heartbreaking moments that we've had where we see how sort of exposed you are when you're that person. And you've done such an amazing job, like credit where credit's due, to do like the big and the broad and the elements of that. And then also just like really turn that around and kind of make us all, tear up in the tent, after we've just come back from a scene with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Rose. Thanks. I appreciate it. It's been so fun. I mean, like, like everyone has said, the more we learn about these characters, the more they inform the choices we make. And the more we are all so excited anytime we learn anything else about their history. And like, it really fills out the picture for us. And it makes each subsequent episode more fun to play when you know more about their history. So we're hoping to do this for a long time. It's been so great.
I hope so too. And Román, with Saucy's being, one of the oldest ghosts, there's such a concept in terms of his personality, in terms of who he was when he was alive, but also who he's become over the course of the last few hundred years, where he's developed, frustrations and resentments and, more of an acerbic tone. But when we see elements of who he was alive, it feels like he was a much more positive and upbeat person. And I love the way that you're able to kind of play both of those sides alongside each other, and even just the push and the pull, and kind of through the journey of Sam and coming into the house and kind of having this friendship and this real sense of family, that it brings him closer back to who he was when he was alive, before it was the afterlife for him. And so how have you kind of built and continued to coexist that relationship and have it always evolve for him?
Yeah, wow. I think that's been a really cool, fun part about seeing the evolution of this character over the last 2 seasons. And I got to hand it to the writers. They gave me so much to play with, and anytime I talked to Joe Port and Joe Wiseman, they were always like, "Well, we just want to bring more of you into the character," and that was fun because we got to see this like romantic side of Sass, and we got to see this, when he was alive and with his dad, he was trying to live up to his father, and he was trying to do all these things. He wanted to be someone. He was passionate about things. Because when I first, booked the job, it was very much like, okay, he's cynical, he's sarcastic, and he's like, kind of be the voice of reason. And I'm like, okay, cool, that's who he is now. But like, how did he get here? And so I think it's been a lot of fun to play the duality of who he was when he was alive and who he has become through this afterlife. And so it's fun to see that push and that pull. So I appreciate you saying that, and I'm excited to see like the farther we go and how he can continue to bring this forward, and to see that the more romantic and shy and reserved part of him, but also see this like pessimistic, blunt old man. And so it's a lot of fun. I love playing him, and yeah, it's so fun. So there are some days where I have to be really grumpy, or I have to be pessimistic, and I literally will be cry laughing before a take because Richie Moriarty is messing with me, and I have to just like
Richie was always singing Whitesnake songs on second season. And now exactly. We know why.
Really.
Always things. No, but like seriously, I will be cry laughing with everybody, and then have to just be like, "What? It's just whatever. I hate my life." And it's so fun to just be on that set. I always keep telling my friends, I'm so sad that you can't come visit the set yet. Because of COVID and all that stuff, because it's such a fun set to be on. And also the set is incredible, the set design. But yeah, it's just a good time, and I just love being part of this amazing team.
So great. And Sheila, I wanted to ask you about, one of the aspects of your performance that feels like such a kind of probably an underrated skill in terms of playing around with Flower's lucidity, awareness, and presence in situations, because it feels like in every single scene that you go into, there's an element of choice at play in terms of, is she fully aware of where she is? Is she fully paying attention and aware of the conversation around her? Does she remember what was happening just before? And sometimes it's all different directions within a scene because it's constantly changing and in motion for her. And so how do you set about going into scenes and making those choices and then finding what that looks like for the character in these different stages of presence?
Yeah, well, I think I try to go into it without overthinking it too much, and really just thinking about how it'll best serve the story. And really the writing will just give me a clue, like what are my lines in this scene? Am I lucid or am I not? Because it's usually pretty clear. But for me, I have these like little rules of Flower's world, which is either she's like deep in an acid flashback. That's like when she's really in it, and she can't remember what she just said 3 seconds ago. And then she also has this like baseline of like, okay, when she died, she was definitely high, probably a little weed, and then, some lingering mushrooms, but like, she's chill, she can have a conversation. And then she drops into these really grounded, lucid moments of like flower, no drugs, just present, like maybe even pre-cult, obviously pre-death, where she just remembers everything perfectly. And so I try to live within those three worlds and just commit to one of those fully, if that makes sense, depending on what the scene needs.
It does. And Rebecca, when it comes to playing Hetty, it feels like she's the most rooted in terms of who she is throughout in a lot of ways, but she does have these kind of small revolutions like the washing machine or learning about feminism, but at the same time, she still always turns around and sees herself as like the lady of the house and everybody under her order. And so it feels like you have to make very kind of nuanced choices in terms of how much of an evolution and how much of a change is she going to make based on these experiences versus how much is she still going to remain rooted in who she's always been. And I love that I've heard you describe it as like she always changes just enough for everybody around her to keep trying. And so how do you find those elements of change without ever pulling her too far away from her core?
Well, again, it's all credit goes to the writers who have all of those things in mind by design. Also, you mentioned at the start of this conversation about growth and how it seems like the ghosts have grown so little or just in little fits and starts. And Sam has had, the livings have had so much growth. I feel like since Sam has come to us, we've kind of been on this fast track renaissance of growth. We've been in this house, in this situation, as in this purgatory with no movement, no possibility for change for some of us thousands of years, hundreds of years. And then all of a sudden a living comes to be there and disrupts what we think is possible, what we thought was possible about ourselves. I think to answer that question, I mentioned Rose's character because so much of what Hetty thought was possible for herself has been influenced very greatly, very recently by seeing her descendant, by seeing Samantha there. So much of what she thought was true or what she needed to be, she's now discovering was all a lie or was never her own opinion, or possibly she never had her own opinion. So there's so many things that they've allowed me to kind of play with, so many ideas that they get to introduce through this stick in the mud, very class-oriented, gender role-oriented woman from this period of time that, let's be honest, had a lot of unkind, unsavory opinions about other classes, other races, other people, other, genders, other sexuality, all these other things. That they can manage so artfully to get into these rather provocative things about history, about American history, and then also do it with such levity and surprise, and that my character manages to be somehow still relentlessly adorable. But that all those things seem possible is fascinating to me. Incredibly fun to play. And to answer your question, how do I calibrate that nuance? I take a cue from from the writing, as Sheila said. I think they know just when to utilize these ghosts as ridiculous children, id-based children characters who can say and do things that seem possibly very. Also, as you said, in talking to Richie, like large choices, but they're so grounded in these characters' ignorance in these moments of what something that they're saying really means or whatever. They manage to be grounded choices, so they can swing for the fences with that comedy, and then also slip in these very provocative statements about American history. And I find it to be really inspiring, and it's a pleasure to get to be not only in this company, as we also clearly love and respect one another, but to be in a show that incites this kind of community and fun and also conversation.
Some would say in creative company.
Some would.
Let's do.
We'll send you the check later.
I work for this place.
And Devan, I also wanted to ask you about playing Thor, because you've got this character who, in one degree is a product of his time, in that his his fury and his brutishness and his anger can come to the surface, but he's also so incredibly soft and vulnerable as a character, and especially with his relationship with Flower, or kind of finding his son again. We've really gotten to see so many sides of that. And so wanted to ask you particularly about just the coexistence of those two sides of him, and really kind of allowing both of them to be fully present in him as a character.
Yeah. Thorfinn's basically like, he's like an icebreaker. He's just a ship that is headed to the North Pole and is just breaking through icebergs, and is just whatever way he's sailing, that's north. And he's searching for Santa Claus, he's like, get out of my way. I'm breaking it up. Also, let's have some fun. And, and that's what it is. That's the dichotomy there. It's like at one moment, it's like all this violence and just like this way. But also it's like, dude, where's Santa Claus at? And that's Thorfinn. I think we could all take a page out of Thorfinn.
I thought Thorfinn didn't like Santa Claus.
But also, flowers.
Yeah, pillage your way to Santa.
Yeah.
I think we should say Devan
First
has
villages and then plant tulips.
Rebecca, what were you going to say?
I'm trying, Devan, to throw you flowers with laurels because you deserve them. Devan has this wonderful, disruptive, insane, bananas way of just saying the most seemingly absurd thing. He does. He is that icebreaker. He pushes through these flows of us, and he seems to be possibly even irreverent in the things that he says sometimes. But he has said some of the most incredibly, beautifully, essentially true things about our show and in our company. It's
like giving Black Granddad, if I'm being honest, like a Black Granddad on the porch, like where they're speaking in metaphors, and you're like, I may not get this right now, but I know in 15 years I'm gonna use this, and it's gonna saturate me to my bones, and it's gonna be good. He's nourishing. With what he said and how he plays that character as well too.
Some people say I'm a bone broth, and if I'm in the fridge, I'm polite.
Put you right in the jambalaya
then. I'm hot and smooth, and I'll nourish you.
If you also make me break more than anybody on set
every time.
It's like you're just random riffs and stuff, but it's also when you speak really gently, something about when you speak really tenderly as Thorfinn, and you just milk this stuff. It's the funniest thing to me.
Little story.
There was a bit
cinnamon.
Of cinnamon. There was a bit of that cinnamon scene that was too long because he took like half an hour.
Cinnamon?
It was amazing.
Cinnamon.
That was a great idea. Yeah, it was, Sheila.
Yeah, Sheila. Good job, Sheila.
And then for all of you, in terms of the scope of playing these characters, I was really, really fascinated by how you kind of always consciously think about what is their space of knowledge and information that they have and that they know in the world, because it's not just a case of, okay, if they lived 500 years ago or they lived 50 years ago, these are the cultural references and things that they would know, because they've obviously also had the opportunity to learn so much from each other along the way. And then we even see so many moments of them learning new things, new phrases, new cultural references in the space of the show. And so how do you all kind of go into scenes and look at what's being discussed and think about your character's perspective based on the knowledge that they would have from both when they were alive and what they've learned from each other?
We do a lot of talking about that. Sorry.
I love that, I feel like one of the things the writers do for Pete is he keeps making 80s references around like Thorfinn or Sasapis. And I'm like, you don't know who that is? And it's like, no, dude, they don't. I feel like there's something very funny that Pete just keeps on his own references and is flabbergasted when he finds out that people from other eras don't get who Woody Allen is, Yeah.
Or that history repeats itself sometimes, like the podcast. Alberta was like, isn't that just radio? Like, what are we really doing here? Like, that's literally just, it's just radio, y'all. Let's stop trying to make it fancy.
Well, it's such a phenomenal show, and I love everything that you've all done with these characters in making them so layered and so textured. So congratulations on 2 fantastic seasons. Hopefully we get many more in the future, and thank you so much to all of you for talking about this.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you
for having us.
Phenomenal
Questions.
Phenomenal.
And some would say you were truly the creative company.
Hey.